Got it.
James, welcome to the show.
Well, thanks for inviting me. It's good to be here.
You're a filmmaker. You've written a book that we're going to talk about. But before the show started, you and I got talking about a recent project that you're working on, which
Yeah.
obviously you find important. I feel that it's important. Do you mind starting there first?
No, sure. I'm making a 90-minute film about suicide for PBS, and then I'm writing a companion book about suicide. Right now, the working title is Solving Suicide, but there's no clear solution to suicide. There are a bunch of interesting directions. Um, the subject is interesting to me because we have an all-time high suicide rate in the United States, especially high among middle-aged men like me and you. And it's the second leading killer of kids between 12 and 24. So there's a lot we can do to help destigmatize suicide, and then to show people the signs of suicide so they can detect it at home or at work in others, so they can maybe ask the question, are you thinking about hurting yourself? Are you thinking about killing yourself?
Have you run into any pushback or hurdles in getting this done, or has it been really well accepted?
Uh, it's very interesting. I've been pushing this film for years. It's not a happy family film, although it's full of hope. Because if you talk to people that have survived, who have tried to kill themselves and survived, they've often they regret trying to kill themselves, and they've turned their lives around. It's without being flippant about it, it's a bottom point from which people often spring back, and they spring back with whole new resolutions. So we'll make a hopeful film that will be full of solutions, full of good advice for people, trying to take care of those around them, and good advice for people with mental health issues. So yeah, it was hard to sell. It was hard to sell. The book, because I have a brilliant agent, the book was easier to sell.
People, this is a emerging tech and science show, and so some people may be wondering why the hell we would be talking about something like this.
Yeah.
But there's several reasons, actually. One is some people can't handle the accelerating pace of change that technology is creating within the world. And then and you mentioned middle-aged men.
Yeah.
Oftentimes blue collar workers who are losing their jobs, they're displaced because of technology. Mm-hmm. Psychologically, they don't handle it as well as, from what I understand from research between men and women losing jobs, men handle it worse, and their suicide rate is going up. So the impact of tech on mental health is huge.
It is huge. We were just, before we went on, we were talking about a really good book called Deaths of Despair. And I'll put it this way by telling a little story. In the 1950s, for example, or after the war, you could be a repairman for Sears Company, and you could repair appliances, and you'd have a long career. You could support a middle-class family life, and then you get a pension at the end. None of that exists anymore. See, I think Sears is gone now, but there's no more blue-collar jobs that really come with pensions and security. There are very few. Not just all that repair work is now contracted out to small companies who pick up freelance employees and treat them like freelancers. Organizations like Uber and Lyft treat drivers like freelancers, so they're not. There's no pension there. That blue collar existence is gone. Even people that are in it now are having a hard time holding on to it. This is why some jobs are very sought after, those with pensions, those with any kind of job security. But those are going away. So suicide is really slamming into the middle class. But more relevant to this conversation is unemployment and future unemployment. We have 7 million professional drivers in this country: cab drivers, truck drivers, delivery people. Those jobs are going to go away with self-driving cars. We have 7 million bookkeepers, back office accountants whose jobs are going to go away. Postal workers' jobs are going away. All the checkout people in your grocery store are turning into self-checkout aisles, and it's going rapidly into the middle class. So that things like legal discovery, first-year law associates, their jobs are going away. Radiologists, we've got IBM's Watson can find cancerous images on an X-ray better than humans now. So it's not just the working class; it's going deep into the middle class. Even back in 2013, when I wrote Our Final Invention, a lot of sports articles, something like 25% of sports articles, were written by automated systems, and now it's even more. So, Gartner and Company says that by 2025, a third of all jobs will be replaced by automation or AI. A Cambridge study said by 2030, 50%. I think it's going to be faster and worse.
I'm getting ads now from a company that it says an AI wrote this ad, and it does the heavy lifting of the copywriting for you.
I tell you, part of it I find thrilling because I've always been a big AI fan, despite writing a book called Our Final Invention. And I'm always fascinated. Right now, GPT-3 is such a hot and fascinating, I got to read more about it, technology brought out by OpenAI. And you give it a few phrases and then ask it to write an essay about that, and it will write a whole essay. It turns into, if it goes on long enough, it turns into gibberish, fortunately. But I think they're trying to get it to write a novel. It writes essays. If you can tell, I want to write a letter and give it the first couple of lines, boom. Because it's ingested, it's an artificial neural net on steroids. It's ingested all of Wikipedia and a bunch of databases. They spent millions and millions of dollars beefing up this artificial neural network. So it's got huge amounts of data that have been fed into it, and it's I think it's an algorithm plus data. So but it's doing amazing things. It's going to replace virtually all writing pretty soon. And here's the thing: it understands language structure, so it does programming because it understands programming language structure.
And what's going to happen to your beginning software engineers?
Right. Well, that's the recipe for the intelligence explosion. When we've got smart algorithms that are improving their own intelligence, they're improving their own software. The short version of that is, we're creating machines that do things better than we do all the time. We see that in the workplace. We see that, all around us. In not too much time, we'll create machines that are better than we are at doing AI research and development. Then they will set the pace of intelligence growth, not us. And we will suddenly find ourselves sharing the planet with something 1,000 or millions of times more intelligent than we are.
Now, isn't this the hope of Neuralink that Elon Musk also founded, is so we can just connect our brains to the AI and somehow be symbiotic and participate without being evolved out of existence?
Yeah. Yeah.
Do we have a shot there?
It's Ray Kurzweil was thinking this, back in 2000 or 1990. And I asked him about it then. I like Elon Musk because he said Our Final Invention is a book everybody should read. So I'm a fan. He's revolutionized the car industry. He's revolutionizing the space industry. He'll probably revolutionize the battery industry. But we haven't had as much advancement in the idea of linking brains to hardware as we have with AI. So AI is advancing rapidly, but the Neuralink type technology is not advancing as rapidly. In that field, we don't have an IBM Watson. We don't have a AlphaGo. We don't have a GPT-3. We don't have any giant steps forward. We do have, in Our Final Invention, I wrote about Rick Granger at the Dartmouth Brain Lab. We do have advances in doing things like figuring out what clusters of brain cells do and putting them into algorithms and then hardwiring them. Then, if a soldier's brain is damaged, in theory, we should be able to implant pretty soon a piece of hardware that will do what that part of the brain did. I find that part of the technology very interesting. The idea of having rich people get smarter, which is where Elon Musk's technology is going, is not that thrilling to me. You know, we don't have any guarantee that super intelligent people are going to be any better than normal, regular intelligent people. In fact, you know, it might become super evil. I mean, if they're a little bit evil now, jack up their intelligence and see what happens.
Coin flip, see who wins. When you were talking to people like Ray Kurzweil that are very pro AI, utopian, maybe you could use that word.
Yeah.
What's sort of their mental model to compensate for creating an alien intelligence that's way smarter than everybody else?
They look at the bright side, and only the bright side. Ray Kurzweil, when I wrote this in my book, that Ray Kurzweil was looking at the world through rosy glasses, people argued, no, he's got chapters and chapters about the downside. He doesn't really. He's got 4 or 5 pages in all of The Singularity is Near about the downside. He's got 4 or 5 pages in The Age of Spiritual Machines. I don't think he's got anything in How to Build a Brain about the downside. So I think my accusation stands. He's being way too optimistic. AI is a dual-use technology, like nuclear fission, like fire. It's capable of great good and great harm. Right now, the intelligence race is in the hands of corporations who have been historically evil. And we can't trust them with this pivotal moment in history. We can't trust them to do it alone. Look at Facebook. I mean, Facebook shared our data with Cambridge Analytica, which shared it with the Russians, which tried to influence our 2016 election. Zuckerberg still doesn't know the meaning of ethics. He doesn't have any clue about corporate responsibility. He's still allowing just lies and lies and lies to go unexposed and unchallenged in his network. The same thing is true of Google. Google has 400 lawyers, in part because they've been sued in virtually every European country for privacy violations, for predatory business practices, for copyright infringement. You know, Apple, you can go on and on. So the people that are in charge of this incredibly sensitive technology and in charge of the next 20 years of development are not really the ones you pick out to drive this train.
So what do we do to democratize and level the playing field for fairness, access, et cetera?
Well, back to Elon Musk, you know, I've just started reassessing OpenAI, because OpenAI started out as, you know, he really took to heart the idea that we could destroy ourselves with artificial intelligence. And he said, it's Pandora's box. We can't put the genie back in the bottle. So he got together $1 billion to start a company that would compete with Google, and who was leading AI at the time. Right now, there's so many players, it's hard to keep track. There's Baidu in China, there's Google, there's Amazon, there's IBM, there's Facebook. He put together $1 billion of investment to compensate AI makers at commercial level in order to create safe AI. And so at some point, he split off the company because he needed more investment, and they realized they could make a lot of money out of this. So he split it in half. Part is profit seeking and part is not. The only way I think the only way we're going to survive the next 50 years is if a company like OpenAI creates the first superintelligence. It's inevitable that it happens. I think the intelligence explosion is inevitable, and that's the point at which we have self-aware, self-improving machines that are writing their own software. I think that point is going to happen sooner than we think. And the only way for it to happen safely is if one dominant superintelligence emerges. And it scares me to say that, because there's a whole body of literature written about the singleton, the dangers of a singleton. And there's other bodies of work written about how good it would be to have an ecology of AI. It's like many super intelligent AIs at the same time, which just scares the piss out of me. it's all pretty spooky, but at least there's one organization that's really kicking ass, and that's with GPT-3 right now, and that's OpenAI. There have been a lot of organizations that are coming out touting uh, artificial intelligence ethics, like the Future of Life Institute, MIRI, the Machine Intelligence Research Institute, which has been around for a long time, the Future of Humanity Institute, and all these institutes who are providing advice and counseling and trying to do what we're talking about, assure the future by assuring the creation of safe AI. However, if you put all their budgets together, it wouldn't be a fraction of OpenAI's or any of the other superintelligence developers.
There's a book called Precipice. Dr. Ord, I think his name is Timothy, who works with several of those organizations, has worked with the UN, and he has discussed the paltry amount of funding. And his position is, okay, so you take a look at all existential risk. Just take a look at it. Where in, say, North Korea was the first group to develop an AI, and that would be an existential risk because they would use it to suppress all of humanity. And if you were dealing with a super intelligence that you could never outwit, that would basically eliminate the future of human potential. And then obviously there's death, right? So a plague hits, pandemic, comet, whatever. And he measured all of that out. And he said that after calculating everything for him, AI was potentially the most dangerous. And he said, why wouldn't we want to put a massive amount of funding behind understanding what could eliminate everybody?
Absolutely. Asteroids are dangerous. I mean, ask the dinosaurs. Asteroids are bad. Pandemics are bad. We don't, COVID shook us down. COVID did a number on our economy, did a number on our jobs, broke up alliances. It was unfortunate we had the world's worst president at the same time we had this pandemic. But COVID wasn't that bad. Its mortality rate wasn't as bad as other pandemics have been in the past. So we're not safe from pandemics just because we've got vaccines for COVID. But I agree, among the existential threats, I think AI is tops. And it's because we don't have as you mentioned earlier, we're talking about nuclear fission, which is of course the power behind nuclear power plants and nuclear bombs. Well, they used to think of nuclear fission before they even thought it was possible in the 20s and 30s. They thought, well, if it is possible, we can split the atom and get free energy, and then this period of utopia will follow, which is very much like the singularity idea. But what happened is we incinerated 2 cities full of people, and then we pointed a gun at our own heads for 50 years with the nuclear arms race. And we're still in danger of destroying ourselves with nuclear fission. We had no maintenance plan for fission. It was developed rapidly during war, and then just blindly in this incredibly stupid nuclear arms race. We have no maintenance plan for AI. It's being developed under similar circumstances. It's already being weaponized with autonomous battlefield drones and robots, and we're headed down a more sensitive and more dangerous path than we were with nuclear fission, because we've got no checks and balances. We have even less than nuclear fission, and I think what I think we need is something like the IAEA, which is the International Atomic Energy Agency, that governs the development of advanced AI, that has the power to look, like it looks in silos, it looks at nuclear refineries, or uranium refineries. We need the same power with an international body that has some meat on it. So everyone has to sign a treaty. Everyone is subject to embargoes, whatever punishments if they don't comply.
I agree. Having transparency into what's going on with AI, hopefully we'll know when we're getting close to creating a certain level of intelligence.
Yeah,
It,
well, we hope.
we hope.
We hope.
'Cause
Fortunately, yeah.
no,
Go ahead.
I'm excited about AI, but like you,
Yeah,
like Elon Musk, it, it's the unknown. If you create something it's beyond egotistical to say that you can outwit something that has the collective intelligence of all of humanity.
yeah. You referred to it as alien intelligence before, and that's exactly what it is. Because while like the artificial neural nets is the big innovation that happened since I wrote Our Final Invention in 2013. It was actually developing as I wrote that. And very briefly, because it's artificial neural nets are very fascinating. GPT-3 is an artificial neural net on steroids, but a bunch of uh, a bunch of scientists in 2009, led by Hinton, came up with the idea that if you take a giant amount of data and feed it to simple learning algorithms, you get immense predictive capabilities. And you can do things like simultaneous translation. If you feed enough French to English translations into the learning algorithms, then when you feed it some French, it will spit out really good English. The more simple learning algorithms you put, the deeper your ANN is, and that's deep learning. Many learning algorithms. GPT-3 is, as I said, it's this idea on steroids. That roughly mirrors how human brains work, but it's very rough. So while we're going to create intelligences that are roughly copy the way our intelligence works, there's still a giant black box element to it. There's still a giant part we don't understand. We know we know the inputs, we know the outputs. We don't know what happens in between. And so if we drive artificial neural nets and add some reinforcement learning, which is what DeepMind says. DeepMind says reinforcement learning is sufficient to get all the way to artificial general intelligence. If we do that, we'll have achieved smarter than human level intelligence in a machine.
And the concept of it being alien, we've already had a sneak peek with AlphaGo, where they had the AI had a move that no human had ever thought of. And for the listeners that don't know, there's more moves in Go than atoms in the universe. And the rich history of Go and the people who felt they had mastered it and had mastered it from a human perspective, just straight out said they would have never thought of that particular move. It was elegant.
Lee Sedol, who was defeated, I actually gave a talk in the same place in Seoul. And I said that someday they'll build a church here, but it won't be built by humans, because that was a really pivotal moment, and we don't understand unless you go and talk to Koreans how deeply wounding that was, and how shaking that was for them, because Go has a long cultural history throughout Asia, but a lot in Korea and South Korea. And they were really stunned by that, and it was a big deal. And as you said, there are more positions on a Go board than there are atoms in the universe. I always heard grains of sand in the planet, but anyway, it's a lot. And people anticipated that an algorithm wouldn't beat Go for another 10 years. So it illustrates the exponential nature of artificial intelligence development.
When we're running into something like this, and I mean, like AI, blockchain, NFT, these concepts that are pushing out there, and that's one of the purposes of this show, is to help people keep up, but with limited understanding. And as important as people like you that have done the legwork to understand AI, what can the typical human do to encourage proper behavior or moderation of the development of artificial intelligence?
First of all, I think because this is like global warming in the 80s. It was just hippies. It was just people. It was people on the margins were saying, "Hey, we're making the earth too warm." Now we've got a giant heat bubble over Oregon that's driving the temperature up to 120 degrees. People in British Columbia are dying from the heat. So it's a real thing. We're like those people. The people that are worried about AI are like those people, and it's going to be a while before the issue gets sufficient attention. So the first thing people can do is read about it. Read my book, Our Final Invention, but read other books. There are a number out there. Get educated about the subject. You don't have to become a programmer, but you should know what the major movements are. And then start looking for platforms that consider AI. In the last presidential election, I think it was only there was only one person who had any idea about AI, which shows how backward our politicians are and how just technologically unaware. But look for AI positions in their platforms and start voting for people that are for AI regulation. I'm usually the last person to suggest the government or international consortium should regulate anything. But in this case, it's like with nuclear fission, it's absolutely necessary.
When you finish with your current film and you publish your book, finish writing your book, do you think you'll go back to another AI project?
Yes. I don't want to give away the subject, but I find it very compelling that the people driving the car are drunk, and they're not worthy to be driving. A few years ago, one of the co-founders of DeepMind came out and said, I wonder if he was thinking about the intelligence explosion, the time when we create something smarter than we are, and the intelligence, instead of, our intelligence is kind of flat. Human intelligence is not getting better. Computer intelligence is going like this. When computers are setting the pace of intelligence, this person said he doesn't trust the major tech companies to be good stewards of the technology. Our entire culture, and especially the tech giants, they say innovation first, stewardship later. Make a mess and clean it up. What was it? Facebook's, their motto?
Move fast and break things. Yeah.
That's cute for a while,
Yeah.
but now we have to grow up. So my next book will be about that we've got to look at who's driving the car, and they're all, right now they've all got whiskey on their breath.
It's interesting they mentioned about the DeepMind founder. When they sold to Google, they required that there was an ethics panel created, and now those AI ethicists are
all fired
or leaving. Yeah. So
well, that's typical. I predicted that back when it happened. I said, first of all, it's never going to happen. Then if it happens, they'll fire them. They said the founders of DeepMind, Shane Legg among them, who he wrote my favorite paper of his is called 100 Definitions of AI, and it's worth looking at.
Okay.
Because maybe it's 100 Definitions of Intelligence. I think it's 100 Definitions of Intelligence, but it was really good. And it gave me when I give talks, it gave me my definition for intelligence, which I won't bore you with right now. But Shane Legg came out and said, well, we're not going to sell to Google unless they create a board of ethics. And sure enough, they promised to, and it was written in their $400 million sale. But then it didn't happen for years and years. And then it happened, and they've created this ethics board. And then the first time, I can't remember her name, but the first time she opened her mouth and said, we shouldn't do this, boom, she was fired. And then her first lieutenant said something, and boom, she was fired. And then there were some protests, and now it's all kind of gone away. And nobody making the profits that Google makes, and that Apple makes, and that Facebook makes are going to slow down one bit for a silly idea like ethics.
Well, even Elon Musk says, like you said, we let the genie out of the bottle. It's not going anywhere. It's trying to mitigate the risk somehow.
Well,
it's not going to stop the machine.
The best people. I mean, it's not like if you believed in symbiotics and the whole idea of AI as its own intelligence, it's as if it's driving the car already, because it's driving these tech companies to shut down anything that could rise against it, that could mitigate it. Google has so many lobbyists paying off so many politicians in Washington that the idea of regulation is still just a pipe dream. But that's what your audience can do. They can vote for the few politicians that have a platform about AI regulation.
When is your film coming out with?
The suicide film, 90 minutes film on PBS about suicide, will come out in September of 22. September
Awesome.
of 22. So it's quite a ways from now. That's when the suicide hotline number changes to 988. I don't know it offhand what the real number is now, but by then it will have changed to 988. And then the book should come out sometime after the film.
All right. Well, we'll definitely be looking for that heavy subject, but important for sure.
Yeah, I'm going to write, and sometime I'll write about something nice, like, the history of bowling.
That sounds great. James, really appreciate you taking the time.
Well, thanks for having me. So the pleasure was mine.